Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be modifying some N64s with the RGB mod boards that we built a couple days ago. So what we have on the table is a Japanese N64. This first one is. This is an early model. This uses the which one is it? The VCD NUS video encoder, which I believe is the launch model. So that's the older one. And then we also have this one right here, which is an NTSC model that uses the AVDC NUS NUS, which is a later model similar to the MAV NUS, which is basically like the last generation of N64s. So these two different models have different capabilities. The VCD NUS chip in the original launch N64 is capable of outputting RGB by itself. So it could use just a simple bypass mod with an amp, but that's not what we're going to be doing today. We will be installing Bordy's N64 RGBv1 board. We have two of those today. I'm going to be installing both of them on this stream, and the reason for that is because these two different types of N64 have two different installation methods that I want to show. So we'll start off with the launch version of the N64. That should be the, well, I wouldn't say easiest one, but it's going to be the, it's really not any easier. So never mind. There's really no particular reason. It's the oldest one, so I guess it's the one we'll do first. That's my reasoning, so hopefully you can accept that. So, to expedite this process, I went ahead and removed all the screws, so you won't have to watch that. And take off the heatsink here. And I'll direct you to the area of interest. So, let's get you zoomed in here. On the N64 main board, there's a couple of areas of interest for this mod. First of all, this is the VCD NUS. This is the video encoder chip. So this is what we're going to be soldering to get the digital signal lines out to go to the digital inputs on the mod board. So D0 through D6 and then DS and clock all come off of this chip right here. Power also comes off of this chip as well. So we'll show you how all that works too. Now, a couple other areas on this model, well, on all models of the N64 that I'm aware of, pin 27 of the PIF NUS chip is going to be soldered to for reset. That pin actually, you can see the trace, runs straight down here to the reset button, and that's actually what resets the console. So for the IGR, the in-game routines that this board allows you to use, that reset line is what it uses to be able to reset by button combination from the controller, reset the console, which is particularly useful, especially if you use like a EverDrive or something like that that requires reset for saving. It's very convenient to have that IGR reset on your controller. That's what I use it for. So that's pretty nice. And then also of interest here, this depends on the model, but pin 16 of the PIF NUS chip should contain a connection to controller port 1's data line, and that is used for picking up the actual signals from the controller and doing those IGR controls. It may not be pin 16 in this particular instance. It could be, there could be potentially a VIA somewhere else that we need to tap into. It depends on the particular configuration of the model of N64 we're looking at. So I'll probe this out and try to figure out where it is. It may not be pin 16. It may be one of these VIAs up here. We'll figure that part out when we get to it. So let's go ahead and get started. So to solder this chip right here, we actually have a pin out I'll go ahead and show you. Okay, so you see the pinout right here shows us what we're soldering to. So in this case, the VDC NUS, the pin 1 is 3.3 volts, and then 2 through 8 looks like are data lines, and then you've got ground, and then desync, and then clock, and then ground again. So what we're going to be doing is soldering a ribbon cable to these basically pins 1 through 12. We'll be skipping pin 9 just because that's the most convenient way for me to wire it up based on how I'm going to be doing this here. And then for the later version that we're going to be doing, the ADVC or the AVDC NUS chip, we're going to be soldering to this style of chip. This pinout is really not relevant to us because we're going to be using a little adapter board for it, because the AVDC NUS chip is a much finer pin pitch and it's much more difficult to solder. Now I have done the modification soldering the wires direct to the ADVC or the AVDC NUS or the MAV NUS chips, and it's totally doable, but the adapter board that we're going to be using makes it a lot easier. So we'll go through that, but first off we got to solder this. So let's get back here. Let's get a slightly more zoomed in view, and let's get to soldering. I'm going to try to keep my head out of the way this time. I seem to have a problem with that sometimes on previous streams, so we'll try to avoid that. So the ribbon cable I'm using here is the correct pin pitch for this connector already, so it should be very easy to solder it in place. I'm actually going to rotate the board position here just a little bit to make it a little easier on me. But basically this ribbon will be soldered directly to here, and these last 2 pins over here will be bumped over just a little bit to skip that pin 9. Sorry, the last 3 pins will be bumped over a little bit to skip the pin 9 on this chip, which is just an extra ground pad. So let's go ahead and get to soldering. The first thing we're going to do is apply some fresh solder to this VDC NUS chip, and that's going to make it easier for us to solder the pins from this ribbon cable on there. Now I did pre-tin and prep the ribbon cable to make it easier for streaming purposes. Try to do as much as I can in advance to make the stream go as smoothly as possible. So we're just adding a little solder, and we got a little bridge there. That's not a big deal. Not a big deal, because I can actually, let's see, seems like we're a little overexposed. See if I can get that a little bit better so you can see what's actually happening. Maybe position my light a little bit differently. Well, okay, I think that's pretty clear. Okay, so you can kind of see what's going on there. We have some bridges. What we're going to do to patch that up is we're going to apply a little bit of amtech flux. And unfortunately, I'm running kind of low on this syringe of amtech flux, and Lewis Rossman's store is out of stock right now, so I'm hoping that gets taken care of soon because I need more. I use this stuff like crazy. Out of all the fluxes I've tried, amtech is definitely the best. Okay, so we've cleared the bridges. now we should be able to just go right in with the ribbon cable and start soldering. So you're going to want to get it positioned even. I'm just going to tack down the first pin. Okay, that's down now. So then we're going to move on. I'm actually going to tack down. I'm going to split these last three here off and kind of get them out of the way. And I'm going to tack down the last pin on this side. So now this connector is firmly in place. Or no, I guess it's not really a connector, but this ribbon is firmly in place. So I'm going to solder each of the center pins one by one until I've got them all in place. And they all look good. Let's check with the tweezers and make sure there's no undue movement. Nope, they're all firmly fixed and appears to have no bridges of any kind. So those look good. So we've got pins 1, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we're going to skip pin 9 because that's just an extra ground, and we're going to go to pin 10, 11, and 12 for the remainder. So let's go ahead and get those in position here. Okay, I'm going to try to make this as easy for you to see as possible, but it is going to be a little bit tough because I do need to hold this firmly in place. So okay, I think you can still see that pretty well. Okay, that's firmly attached. And we'll go for the one on the end there, in the middle. Okay. All right, let's check and make sure there's no movement. No, those are all very firmly affixed. Make sure that there's no bridges. Seems to be completely clear of any kind of bridges all the way across the chip. So what I'm going to do is pull it under the microscope real quick, and you're not going to see this, so that I can get a really good view of it and just confirm everything. So give me just a second here. Yeah, it looks great. Looks fantastic. Okay. So, that's it for the encoder chip. That's done. So, what we'll do now is a little bit of cleanup. Okay, looks good. So now this ribbon is going to be folded over, and we're just going to kind of press it down. Press it down so that it's able to come back around this way. So let's zoom you back out so that you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So here's where it's going to have to go. We're going to basically route the ribbon like this, fold it over, and it's going to come out close to the multi-AV port. The reason for that is because the shielding has a nice little tab right here. Focus, focus. Really? We're not gonna. Okay. So it has a nice little tab right here that we can bend down, and that gives an area for the wires to pass through without interfering with the shield. So we're gonna go ahead and bend that over, and we're just gonna use some pliers to do that. So now that's bent over, that's a nice soft, non-cutting angle for the wires to come out right at the multi-AV port. They'll come up and over and then to this heatsink, which is where we're going to actually be mounting the N64 RGB board. So back to the main board, we'll go ahead and prep that up. So what I do for the main board to help with routing the wires is I take a little bit of tape. I use this 3M double-sided adhesive. This red 3M double-sided adhesive comes in these rolls. I take a little bit here and I just stick it right where that multi-AV out is located. So stick it right down, and this is going to hold the ribbon in place as it exits the back of the console here. Yep. Come on. This tape is fantastic. I mean, it's really good quality stuff. I'm told that this is what they use to affix glass to skyscrapers. Don't know if that's true, but that's what I've been told. That's at least the marketing that I've been fed on this one. And it's very, very sturdy. I could see it being used in that application. It's also weatherproof, which really doesn't matter for this application here in particular, but it is nice to know that it's weatherproof in case I ever need to, put it in some sort of inclement weather situation. So anyway, by sticking this ribbon down, we basically just keep everything, we keep no low stress on all the components in here. So these joints and everything, they're not going to be stressed in any way by any of the further installation stuff we're doing. It kind of keeps just everything together, right? And then in the future, if you have to open this up and work on anything in this N64, when you go to take the shield off, you're not going to run as much of a risk of accidentally ripping the ribbon cable off, because you're going to have at least this area here kind of acting as an initial stop to stop you from pulling the ribbon completely out. Now, like I said, there's two other areas we need to get wire to. So this ribbon cable is a 16-pin ribbon cable, so it has enough wires on it to do everything we need it to do. So what we're going to do here is we're going to separate off two more wires. So we're going to do the two wires that are closest to the edge here. Whoop. Just give those a little nick, and then we're going to strip them off. And then these two wires are going to be soldered to the reset and control pins. And I stuck those down too. So now this will come out as one ribbon, nice and clean. And if we need to, you'll see whenever we orient the ribbon coming out of the top of the console. But I'll show you what that looks like. But anyway, so what we're gonna do is on the mod board. Let's see here. So our control pin is right here, and our reset pin is right here. So when this mod is installed, this board's going to sit like this. So when this ribbon comes out, basically the ribbon is going to be oriented like this. I don't know if that makes any sense, but the ribbon's going to be oriented like this, and going into the digital inputs over here. So we're going to be running one little strand. Those two little strands on the end here are going to run out to this spot right here. So what we're going to actually do is, because of the arrangement here, we're going to go ahead and just strip this back further, because we're not going to have this included on the same ribbon. It's just there's not enough. How can I say this? In order to not waste ribbon cable, we want to have the shortest runs possible. So it's just going to make more sense to have these as separate conductors that run over to the other side of the board. I wish that all of the wiring for the from the inside of the shield there all went to this side of the board. That would be really nice, because it would allow, basically you would just run one ribbon cable in here that has everything connected to it, and it'd be so much nicer. But that's not how it is. I'm entertaining the idea of modifying the board file and coming up with a new board version for this mod that moves a few things around to make it more convenient, because I've installed quite a few of these now, and there are definitely some convenience items that I would appreciate. So we're going to do the reset and the control lines now. I'm going to probe out this PIF NUS chip and see where, if it is on controller port 1 is on the pin 16 of this particular model. So we're going to poke down in there to pin 2 of controller port 1, and we're going to check pin 16. And there it is. So pin 16 on this model, the NUS CPU 02 model, is actually the correct one. It's got the control line on it as well. That's for controller 1. If you wanted to put it on one of the other controller ports, you could. But I like to put it on controller 1 because it seems to make the most sense. I mean, you're always going to have controller 1 plugged in theory. Okay, let's go ahead and get to soldering this. This one's also going to be pretty simple, similar to the one we did before, only we just have 2 pins to install. So we'll go ahead and tin this. So pin 27, like I said, is reset, and pin 26 is control. Try to bend the pins, try to bend the wire up a little bit so that it has an easy way to position it down there with the pin. And we'll go ahead and solder it in place. Okay, that's in there good. Now let's do pin 16. Okay. Pin 16 is good too. Let's go ahead and check, as always, for movement. Nope. Both are very solid. So those are good. Let's go ahead and get those folded over. I like to pass them through these capacitors here. It's kind of like a strain relief of sorts. Alright, so we're done on the underside. All we need to do is just keep track of where this wire is. So I'm gonna peel up this one. Whoop, tape came with it, that's fine. Alright, so get that put back down. Okay. Okay, so now I have this ribbon attached down here, and I can keep track of which side is which. So the right side of this two wire pair here is the control line, and the left side is the reset line. So when we go out to the top here and wire those up, we know what's what. So right is control, left is reset. So now we can go ahead and get the top put back on, and we're done down there. So everything else that happens is up top. Let's go ahead and zoom you out a bit. So we're going to go ahead and install our board. For this, I use the same roll of red 3M adhesive, just like I used earlier. I always do 2 layers just for extra isolation from the board. You want this to be well isolated because there are components on the bottom of this board that could short out to this, very easily could short out to this heatsink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover up the main areas of concern, which is the JTAG port, and then of course these capacitors and everything else will be protected by this as well. But go ahead and stick on 1 layer. And we'll stick on a 2nd layer. And that gets it elevated really well off of the top of the board, and no risk of these pins poking through and shorting out. So we're going to leave the adhesive on for now. We're going to get our positioning kind of figured out. So what I like to do is position it to where that it's kind of towards the end of the board, so that you can get a nice easy kind of arc around with the digital lines. So basically what we're shooting for is kind of like this sort of maneuver right here. So it'll flip over and attach to this board like this. I know it's kind of a nightmare because of how everything's positioned, but kind of flips over the board like that. And so we need about this much length right here on the cord. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and snip that. Now the white wire here is the 3.3 volt supply, so we're going to actually snip that a little bit longer than we need for the rest of them, because that's going to be routed underneath this connector and then over to the VCC pad, so it needs a little bit more distance. It's specifically just for the 3.3 volt line. Give it just a little bit extra length, and that should be I mean, that should be plenty. That should be plenty right there to get it where we need it. So yeah, like I said, so it goes over and solders in like that. So what we're going to do now is get this VCC line out of the way. We're also going to get the ground line out of the way. Well, okay, hold on. Let's strip this first. So the way I like to strip these ribbon cables is I like to take a knife blade and just score right across the top, and then do the same for the bottom. Just score right across, and then you can just use, I'll take my side cutters usually, and I'll just take and lightly press down with the side cutters, and just enough to grip the insulation, and just pull it right off. So now that's stripped, and we're going to touch up those wires a little bit there. You may not be able to see that very well, but they got a little bit frayed up. So we're just going to squeeze those wires, those individual strands together, so we have nice tight strands, and then we're going to tin that wire. Let's go ahead and get you a little further zoomed in here so that you can see the tinning action occur. So basically, all we're going to do is just take the iron, take a little bit of solder, and just apply solder to each pin. You want to flood plenty of solder into each pin, not because it's going to take that much solder, but because the rosin flux in the solder, assuming that you're using flux core solder, which you should be for this sort of stuff, it makes your life so much easier. That's going to flux the pins as you're feeding the solder in. So now these pins are a little bit long, I would say, for the digital pads that we're going to be soldering to. So I'm going to actually trim them down just a hair. One of the nice things about this cable versus the this multicolor cable that I usually use, this stuff's new. Compared to this multicolor cable that I normally use, this stuff does not shrink back under the heat. So you can very reliably determine how much length you've cut and how much that's going to actually, be whenever you're done with it. Okay, so last pin here is ground. So we're going to split that one off so that it can go over to the ground point just a hair further over on the board. So now we just need to solder the digital lines. And we're going to do that right now. So the pin pitch on this is perfect to match up with the encoder and the board, the digital board. So That's cool. Makes it really, really easy. So let's try to get you in position here to see exactly what's going on. Get this excess ribbon cable out of the way. Okay. So what I'm going to do is pre-tin the pads just so that we can have the easiest time possible. Got a little bit of a bridge there, but that's no problem. And then VCC and ground were already soldered because of that's how I powered them for the original programming of the board. So now everything's tinned up, so it will be pretty simple to get the wires soldered in. So when we set up the board initially, or when we set up the ribbon cable initially that we wired in underneath the heatsink here, we had it to where basically the white pin 1 is 3.3 volt, so we got that peeled away, and that's going to be routed over to the VCC pad over on this side here. And then ground is this pad on the very end here, and then the rest of them are digital lines and clock and sync lines. So what we're going to do is just sync up the wires to the pads for where these belong, and start soldering. This is actually quite difficult to do here. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to pull the entire board out of the shell. We're going to get the board on the table and get this shell out of here. This might make it a little bit easier. Or not. Or not. It may not make it any easier at all. It doesn't seem to be making it any easier. Let's see if I can get this board sitting on top of something. There we go. Roll of tape. Perfect. Alright, so now we can work. So we'll start by just getting this first pin on the end of the ribbon attached to this first clock pin here. Okay, so that's done. And now everything else pretty much just falls into line with minor adjustment. Okay, so that's done. I'm going to add a little bit of solder in a couple of areas. A couple of the joints didn't look too great. Okay, that should about do it. All those joints look pretty good. Okay, let's go through and, of course, check them with pliers. I mean, with tweezers. Okay, seems perfect. Let's go ahead and get ground positioned. And then the last thing is 3.3 volts or VCC. So we're going to fold this pin 1 under. We're going to trim off the excess and strip this wire, and we're just going to use regular wire strippers for this because we only have one lead to strip. Okay. Go ahead and tin that. Okay, that's done now too. So we have digital lines and power all soldered. At this point, what I'd like to do is go ahead and switch us over to, or get the board kind of like in its final position here, and stuck down. So this is about where it's going to be, and then the analog lines are going to run off of here back behind the board. So let's go ahead and figure out what we're going to need for the controller and reset lines. So those need to be about right here. Go ahead and trim those. Okay. So now we're no longer tethered to the larger spool of cable, which is nice. So what I'm going to do now is make sure I've got these right. So we said before, the right side is the control line and the left side is the reset line. So let's go ahead and get this prepped up. And that was, with just 2 lines, you can just strip it with side cutters or something like that. It requires a little bit of finesse, but you'll get there if you do it enough. When you're working with a large quantity of leads, it's not as easy to make that happen. So I usually just avoid it entirely. Okay, so this one I've pulled off to the side is control. This one here is reset. So let's go ahead and position the board and kind of stick it in its final location, which I'm going to call right about here is good. So this board is stuck in its final location. Now let's go ahead and run these reset wires, control and reset wires. So this wire is reset, so let's go ahead and solder that on first. So reset goes to reset. Oop. A little bit of trouble there. Okay. Control goes to, unsurprisingly, control. Okay. So those are wired now. I'm going to go ahead and tuck this wire up under here because I want it to look nice. These are all digital signal lines, so wire lengths shouldn't be a huge issue versus the analog signal lines that you want to be as short as possible. Analog transmission lines need to be short. But so there we go. We're done with the digital side of things. Now we just move into the analog side of things. So we need to wire to these to the connectors back here. A few things to note on these older, like early generation N64s. Whoops. You did have the RGB lines are not hooked up to anything, so these pads can be directly connected to. But the sync line does have some sort of connection. It's not clear to me what exactly it hooks up to, because sync isn't used for anything in the N64 as far as I know. But basically, get you a little bit further zoomed in here. So you see this line right here is sync, and it comes down over here to this capacitor, and then it also jumps around to this little resistor here. So what we need to do is remove this resistor from circuit, and that will disconnect the sync line completely. The way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to get a little solder here on the iron, and I'm just going to wipe it off the circuit board. So that's the end of that. There's no more sync connected to anything on the rest of the board. So now we need to get everything soldered to these connectors right here. First, before we do that, let's go ahead and look back at the other side here. So here's what we need to get over to the other side. We've got, so there's 75 ohm C-sync, red, green, blue, TTL C-sync, and ground. I'll give you my opinion. I don't use 75 ohm C-sync. I use TTL C-sync because most high quality cables, specifically the ones I recommend for N64 and Super Nintendo use, are from retrogamingcables.co.uk. Those cables use resistors, attenuating resistors in line to take a TTL C-sync output and convert it down into a display compliant output. If you use the 75 ohm C-sync, you need like a pass-through cable that doesn't have any resistors in it. Otherwise, you may not get picture. I know the open source scan converter specifically will not accept picture. It doesn't accept sync. That's run through a CS75, 75 ohm C-sync run through a cable that has an internal resistor. It will not display a picture. So you need to make sure that it's configured the way that makes sense for your setup. And I think for most people who'd be interested in doing an N64 RGB mod, they're probably going to be using quality cables that are already pre-attenuated, because most consoles in their stock form output TTL C-sync, and we're built to have attenuating resistors in line, and that's true for the Super Nintendo. So that's what most of those connectors are made for. Those SCART cables are made for a Super Nintendo, so you want to be compliant with that standard, in my opinion. If you're making your own cables, you can do whatever you want, but as far as like just for a general potential customer, and for myself personally, TTL C-sync makes more sense. And notably, with TTL C-sync, like I do have a cable that, like a low-grade SCART cable, that doesn't have resistors in line, and it does still work on my PVM TV. So it's not necessarily a problem if you have a TTL sync with no resistor. It's just out of spec, technically. So for this, we're going to be running 5 wires, 3 for red, green, and blue, 1 for sync, and 1 for ground. Okay. So I have 5 wires ready here. Just need to tin them up real quick. Same procedure as always. Don't burn your desk if you can avoid it. I mean, it's up to you. If you want to burn your desk, that's your prerogative. But I'm not endorsing burning your desk. I just want to come out and say that. That's not my platform here. Not saying I'm anti-burning your desk. I'm just saying that, you know, I'm not overtly pro burning your desk. Now, I am anti-burning your body, so be careful. Soldering irons are hot. Okay, sorry, my computer seems to be stroking out right now under the pressure of streaming. I know it's quite tough for it. But let's go ahead and proceed, assuming that I am still streaming. Never can tell with OBS. Okay, that's ready to go. Yeah, OBS does seem to have crashed, so let's see if we can remedy this at all. There we go. We're back alive. Seems like OBS was just having a little bit of a freak out. Alright, so now what we need to do, since we've got everything soldered, is we just need to get this little bundle of wire back here in the shortest distance possible. So generally speaking, what you want to do, there's a little tab here that in the plastic of the N64 body, it's like right here. This little standoff here is going to be in the way, so you want to try to pass the wire up and over it. That I believe is the shortest distance to success. So we're going to kind of aim for the top, if you know what I mean. And so this right here should be about enough slack to get us where we need to go. So go ahead and cut them off there. Alright, so the left side is ground, and then you go, well, okay, let's start from the right. Right is red, then green, then blue, then C-sync, then ground. Okay, so on this side, we need to do red, green, blue, C-sync, and ground. Let's go ahead and strip those. See if I can do this in one shot. Nope, did not work. There we go. Alright, so those are all stripped. Ready to go. Let's go ahead and tin them. Okay. Just double checking the pin out so I make sure I get everything soldered properly. So we got red. Oh, need to recut these because they did not. Guess I didn't split them deep enough. Okay, so we got red, alright, and red goes to pin 1, which is the bottom there. And then we got green, which goes to pin 2, which is the top one there. Then we got blue, which goes to pin 4, which is this one. So we're going to do blue first. Yeah, let's do blue first. Maybe we'll do ground first. I try to do this in the way that is most convenient for me. So I try to do like this back row first and then move into the front row last. So let's go ahead and apply some solder to each of these pins that we're going to be working with. Get them nice and ready to receive the new wires. So those are ready now. So let's go ahead and start with ground. After all, so ground, what I try to do is get the wire down into the via if I can. Doesn't always work out, and in this case it did not. It did not work out in this case. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to trim these because they are a little bit long. Yeah, we're going to trim all these down just a bit. Okay. Let's try again. Okay, we have good strong bond there. Okay, the next one is in the row here is sync, so we'll pull that aside. We'll solder that last. Then we got blue, and blue is pin 4, so that's right next to ground, right here. I'm going to solder that in. Okay, that's good. All right. Then we got green, which is pin 2. Whoop. Sorry, this is not fantastic Try to get some tweezers in there. This is tough to film. This particular operation is pretty tough to film. I would like to get a like a quick solder board set up for N64. That would make this a lot easier. Okay, so now we got sync. Let's go ahead and get sync soldered in. Okay, that's good. And then last is red, which is pin 1. And then we're done. We can see if this thing even works. So, red's good. Green's good. Blue is good. Ground is good. Sync is good. Looks like we're all good. So now we're going to make sure that we can clear that shield here. Let's go ahead and get the rear shielding put on. As you see, got plenty of space for this wire to pass freely through the casing and not run into the bottom post here. This goes just right around to the video port. So we get that right there. And that one's done. So let's go ahead and do it before we put any screws in or anything like that. Let's go ahead and do a test run here. See if we get video. So go ahead and get everything hooked up. Get a jumper pack installed. Okay. Well, let's see what happens. There you go. And that's a thing. Ooh, that doesn't look good. What was that? Ooh, that's some weirdness right there. I don't like that. So I wonder who's at fault here. Is it my cheapo SCART adapter that I'm using? Is it my cheapo SCART cable that I'm using? Or is it my homemade RGB mod? What is happening? Okay. overdid it a little bit on that resistor. Try to get you a view to see what's going on here. So, sorry about that. I'm just gonna get a little bit of a flux on these. This seems to be where the issue is. And I had an issue similar to this one time on another board that I built. It was a color depth problem. I wasn't getting full color resolution. And it turned out there was just a bridged, one of these ferrite beads was bridged, and it was causing color depth issues. So we'll take a look under the microscope. See what we're looking at here. Okay, don't appear to have any bridges or anything like that. So let's try it again. I wouldn't say that this is one of those, it's more of an art form than a science type things, because it's very much is a science. But there's a little bit of art to it. Okay, seems to have fixed it. Don't see any weird behavior now. So let's go ahead and clean up that. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that seems to have fixed it. Just a little bit of reflowing of those just a little bit of reflowing on those ferrite beads. Let's test the IGR functions. So, let's see if IGR, okay, reset works. Let's see if, okay, deblur controls work. And I'm assuming color mode works, but it's hard to see from capture. So this is good to go now. I'm going to go ahead and shut this one off and put it aside for later reassembly. I'll take care of that off stream because there's nothing revelatory in the process of reassembling one of these N64s, so I doubt you'll be missing anything. Okay, time for round two. This is the NTSC one, and this has the ADVC in US chip, which is much smaller. Show you what it looks like. Oh, a little dusty in here. Clean that up. Clean that heatsink up. Okay, let's take a look at the ADVC, AVDC, whatever, AVDC in US. So if you recall, the pin pitch of the VCD in US chip it was the same as the wire that I use, right? So let's look at an example of the wire up against this one. As you can see, each pin is like twice the size of the wire. So this is a lot harder to solder just by hand with wire. So what we have here are these little adapter boards. And it sits right in there. It's a little castellated, has little castellated pads on it. Sits right in there, gets soldered in place, and it breaks out the digital lines and the power to a pin pitch that matches the wire. Makes it a lot easier. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to solder this in place. To start with, we're going to add some solder to the pins of the encoder chip, just like we did last time. And this time I'm really flooding it on there because I'm going to hit it with flux. I'm not concerned about bridges at all, because this whole thing's going to get flooded with solder. Go ahead and pick up that last little bead. Okay, so that's good to go. So we line it up with the edge here, and basically we're just going to flow some solder into this first pin, get that straightened up. Okay, get some more flux applied in here. Lots of flux in this process. But you're basically just drag soldering, so you're just wiping it over the pins and dragging solder with you. It's a little bit too much solder on there. So we're going to suck a little bit of that out with the solder wick. And then we're going to run back through and just make sure everything is good and connected. Okay, I'm going to take a quick peek under the microscope. Okay, looks good under the microscope. We're going to go ahead and with something like this, you want to be sure that there are no shorts. So we're going to go ahead and probe it and just make sure that there's no shorts anywhere with any of these digital lines. That was not a short. I bumped a CPU pin. So we're short free, which is good. So this is going to aid us a lot. So now this is done. We're going to do exactly what we did before. So we have our 11 pins here, and for this we've got the VCC and ground pads over there. So what we're going to do is trim off 2 extra pads or extra little wires to get them over there. So now we've got 2 on the end trimmed off so that they'll work as conveniently as possible on the N64 side of things. And then we're going to trim, so we're going to get these to where they go over to the connector, to the pads on the connector. So ground and VCC will go right there. And we're going to get the rest of the ribbon here trimmed to where it all lines up together so that it works. So we're going to trim this ribbon back about this far, right here. Okay, so that's trimmed, and then we have this excess that we're going to wire over to the VCC and ground. So let's go ahead and get this wire stripped using the method that I showed earlier. Okay. Okay. And then, of course, we're going to tin the wires, as always. So those are ready to go. So this time, because of the positioning of everything, this is going to actually be even easier to install on the other end, because we won't have to actually split off the power line over there. We're doing it on this side here. So let's go ahead and pre-tin these pads. Okay. So, in this case, pin 1 is going to be D0, and then we're going to go all the way through the digital lines until we get to the power, which will route over to the side there. And this will perfectly match the pinout on the N64 side of things. And let's get this. It's important to get your wires angled in a way that's convenient for you to solder. Okay, that's the first one tacked in place. So you'll notice that I always go to the two ends. I just find that to be the easiest way to do it, is to tack both ends and then solder the middle pins as you go. So we'll try to press this down a little bit more. Yeah, come on. There we go. So now everything's tacked in place. We'll go back through. Just add a little bit of extra solder to make sure we got a good connection on all of them. And of course, get you a nice little bridge there on one of them. That's always helpful. You always want to get a bridge. That's sarcasm. Can you tell? Okay, let's take a look under the microscope. Looks all right. Let's check each pin. Okay, that was just jacket that I got a hold of there. No, all the joints are strong. All the joints are strong, so that's good. So we're gonna go on these two extra conductors here. We're gonna go with ground on the inner one and VCC on the outer one. That aligns with the pinout on the actual board, so this will be a straight connection on the board. So, ground, VCC. Let's go ahead and strip these. Tin them. split them. Okay. So ground. Goes right there. And VCC right there. There you go. So it's all soldered on this side. And the rest of this is going to go much the same as before. So fold it over. Like so. And that's about where the differences stop. So let's go ahead and get the rest of this install done, and then y'all be all set, ready to go, ready to get out there in the wild world of N64 RGB mod installation. You can understand the struggles that I deal with as someone who does this somewhat often, and maybe we can all have a better appreciation for the world around us. At least that's what I hope will come of my videos on these topics. It's nice to dream, right? So there's that. And then of course we have the reset and controller lines, which let's go through here. I think this is one of those ones where it's gonna be different. Where the controller line's not going to be on pin 16 of the PIF in US. I don't think so. So let's go poking around. So we're on controller port 1. Oh. So it is on this one too. So the NES CPU 05 board also has the PIF in US pin 16 routed to controller port 1. So that's nice. I swear there are versions that are not like that. You're just gonna have to trust me. I can't prove it because I don't have one right in front of me right now, but I swear. On my life, I swear. Okay, let's get back in here. Just like last time, we have pin 28 and pin 16. Get those tinned up nicely. And we've got our 2 pins here ready to go, tinned and ready to go. Okay, that one's good. Let's get pin 16 done. Okay, those are good. And I've aligned the pins the same as last time, so the right pin is control on here, and that runs all the way up here. So right is control, left is reset. So that's how we've got it on this one. Go ahead and prep up the heatsink again. Okay, so that's ready to go. Done. Okay, and then of course positioning the other N64 RGB board. Just like last time. Going for around there, so let's go ahead and get the adhesive put on it. Okay, so once again we got these reset and control lines here, and we're going to be trying to do one of these numbers here. So if the position is about right here, that's going to be about this long. So just like last time, we're going to trim this down. In this case, the last two lines on the ribbon need to be extended just a bit, because power and ground are on that end now. So we're going to extend those two pins by just a hair. I mean, it's pretty much right next door. Just want to give them a little bit of extra length, but nothing too crazy. Okay. Those soldered. We're going to go ahead and extract the board from the casing again to ease with the remainder of the installation. I'm going to go ahead and tin those two that I stripped already, and I'll get the rest of them. Okay. So just like last time, we're going to go ahead and pre-tin all of these pads. Okay, everything's ready to go there. Let's go ahead and get this positioned. Okay. Okay. The usual. Check for rigidity. Okay, looks good. Alright. Then remember we said the inside pin here is ground and the outside pin is VCC. So seems I pulled a little bit too much extra slack on these, but that's okay. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit more slack on these power lines because all they're doing is providing power and ground, but gives you a little more flexibility, which isn't a bad thing. Okay, so those are ready to go. Alright, let's go ahead and get this reset and control line. Well, hold on a second. I say that. Let's go ahead and get the board in its final position here, and then we can get the reset and control lines done. So reset and control. The right one we said was control, right? Well, shit, I can't remember. Let's find out. I think that was right. Go probe the controller line. Yep, so the right one was control, left one is reset. Let's go ahead and get this stuck in place. Okay, those are in place, nice and good. Looks good. All right, so this part's done. The digital portion is done. Once again, let's go ahead and do the analog portion. And tin the RGB lines. C-sync. Okay. Okay. That's all good. Alright, on this board, unlike the last one, the sync line is actually not connected to anything. So you don't have to remove any components. So let's go ahead and get this routed. And just like last time, we just want to have enough room that we can clear this post here. So we're just going to cut that. Go ahead and strip it. And this time we're going to strip less wire, because last time it was too much. Try to learn from our mistakes here. Try to learn our lesson if we can on this stream. Sometimes it's hard to learn your lesson. Okay. Okay, so we got red, green, blue, sync, ground. Just like last time. Of course, it's always the same. Red, green, blue, sync, ground. So just like last time, we'll start with ground. Go ahead and tin up these pins here. So ground. Okay. Sync will get out of the way for now. Blue, soldering right next to ground. Okay. And green. Sync. Okay, that's good. And then blue. I mean, red is what I meant to say. Okay, red's good, sync is good, green is good, blue is good, and ground is good. So, should be ready to test. jumper pack put in there. Okay, ready? Here we go. And that's another RGB mod done. Let's poke this board a little bit and see if we get any weird behavior. We don't. So we're good. Alright, well, that's about it. I'm going to reassemble these boards on my own time here and get this all up and running. And then these N64s are going to go onto eBay. So, hope you enjoyed watching. Appreciate if you did, and if you wish to join me next